Hello, it's Randi Rhodes. Here's a clip from our show, and go to randyrhodes.com for the whole thing and a podcast. Buy a stinking podcast.
Mary had a little man.
The fall. We believe that all men are created equal.
To the magnificent mosaic that is America.
From radio beacon to radio beacon. I have a dream today. Change has come to America.
Knock, knock. Who's there?
It's a figment of your imagination.
Randi Rhodes Show. Turn up your mind.
She was at church, just like any other Sunday. Out of nowhere, shots started coming through the windows. Windows broke out, shots were flying. Then the shooter came in through the front doors, and the Sunday school teacher sitting next to her yelled, "Get on the floor." So she got on the floor. A lady sitting to her left also got on the floor. The Sunday school teacher left, and she doesn't know what happened to him. The shooter came into the church and started shooting everyone, and people were running out of the church, and she thinks he was shooting them as they were leaving. She doesn't know how many people were actually able to get away. She does know that after people stopped running out of the church, he started walking around the church, going up and down the aisle, shooting everybody that was laying on the ground. And she said he walked up and down the aisles quite a few times and made his way around the church, and eventually ended up where she was, which is on the very back pew, and started shooting the lady next to her multiple times. And then she was pretty certain she was next, and her life was about to end. Then somebody with a gun showed up at the front of the church, caught the shooter's attention, and he left, and that was the end of the ordeal.
I mean, that...
She stayed on the ground the whole time, never saw him, just saw his shoes or his boots as he walked around the church, and got a glimpse of him being completely dressed in black.
Jesus. Moses. I mean, it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. So here is this guy's record. Okay, the guy is in the Air Force. He's threatening to kill his superiors. He's smuggling weapons onto the Air Force base. You ever wonder why, like the military is unarmed in their, on their bases and stuff? Yeah, because more guns means more death. That's why. So they had this guy who obviously had issues. I mean, bad ones, right? And they put him in a behavioral place in New Mexico, awaiting for his court-martial. He escapes from this place. Everybody knows that he's pled guilty already to... First of all, he literally broke his child's skull. Okay, he literally did that, and he was abusive to animals, which is another indication of a violent personality disorder. He had a wife before this one, and they got divorced because he was violent towards her. This wife that he was married to currently, although they're estranged, he actually, pulled a gun on her. And she attends the church, and everybody's pretending that they don't know what the motive is. This is domestic violence, people, and I can't even tell you how many times domestic violence is a precursor to something like this. In fact, I compiled a few episodes for you. Okay, 5 years before this shooter uses this semi-automatic to kill 26, children. The youngest was like, what, 18 months? A baby! And, people up to 72 years old, elderly, frail people, you know what I mean? Some of them said, or one woman at least said, that she didn't feel herself being shot because of the pain meds she's on. So there's a plus to being on pain meds. Get shot, you won't feel it. But anyway, he was court-martialed on charges of assaulting his wife, fracturing his infant stepson's skull. He also had been threatening his superior officers. I don't see that charge mentioned anywhere. Smuggling guns onto the Air Force Base, escaping from a behavioral center, pending court-martial. Don't see that mentioned anywhere. The Air Force, how did Heather Wilson, do you remember Heather Wilson? She was, a representative from New Mexico? How did she become the Secretary of the Air Force?
What happened in Texas was absolutely awful, and I think all of us on Sunday just were heartbroken. But we have initiated a review in the Air Force to find out why his fingerprint records were not transmitted to the database, and we'll find out why.
Do you know if this is a broader problem? Is this a more institutional problem? Is this more than one case where this happened?
We don't know, but we are checking all of the Air Force databases, and there are several of them, to find out and confirm that all court-martial convictions for these kinds of offenses have been reported in the civilian database.
We have to do with the Army and Navy and all of the branches of the Armed Services. You would think. Is there any reason to think that they don't do it either, or that things are missed there as well? Or
the Defense Department Inspector General is also going to be looking across the department to make sure that everything is checked and that all procedures are clarified. We'll actually be doing a stand down in the middle of the month to do complete training of the officers responsible for this.
Yeah.
Have you thought about whether the Air Force will have to accept some form of liability from the families as a result of this?
No, I'm more interested in responsibility.
Right.
And we've taken responsibility, and we're going to find out what happened and fix it.
Holy crap, man. I don't, okay, so domestic violence. All right. So this is what he's done. Now, he's only being court-martialed for domestic violence. He's only being court-martialed for beating up his wife and fracturing his stepson's skull. That's what he was. But apparently, he had stalked multiple ex-girlfriends, including one girlfriend that he dated when he was 18 years old and she was 13. And then in a press conference on November 6th, officials said the shooting was considered likely related to a domestic situation. You think? Las Vegas shooter, right? This guy, he picks up 58 people, wounds, injures like 500 more. Don't hear anything about it. It's too soon, you know. Too soon. I mean, we have one of these, we've had two of the deadliest in just the last 35 days. So when do we talk about this? I say right now. So that guy was known for verbally abusing his girlfriend, right? I mean, people said he treated her like crap and he would tell her to shut up at the Starbucks and all that. Okay, the Nashville church shooting. Anybody remember the Nashville church shooting in September where one woman was murdered and 8 other people were killed? Yeah, that shooter, his girlfriend had twice reported him for domestic violence. San Bernardino. The man that entered the classroom in San Bernardino in the elementary school and used a revolver to kill his estranged wife, Karen Smith, and her 8-year-old student, Jonathan Martinez, injure another child and terrorize a community before killing himself. Yeah, remember, he shot his wife. Sort of domestic, isn't it? Yeah. And then the neo-Nazi who drove the car into the protesters in Charlottesville and killed Heather Heyer and 19 others who were wounded in Charlottesville, he had reportedly abused his disabled mother. And then years before a shooter opened fire on the ball game and, shot Steve Scalise in the hip, he was arrested for punching his foster daughter's friend in the face, remember? And firing a shotgun at her boyfriend. A year before, the shooter in January murdered 5 people and injured 45 others at the Fort Lauderdale airport. He was charged with physically assaulting his girlfriend before the perpetrator of the now second deadliest mass shooting in modern U.S. history murdered 49 people and 58 others at the Pulse nightclub in Orlando. His ex-wife told media that he had beaten her. He had confiscated her paychecks. He had isolated her in her own home. See a pattern here yet? Okay. Before, a shooter killed 3 people and injured 9 others outside the Planned Parenthood clinic in Colorado Springs, Colorado in November of 2015. He'd been reported by multiple ex-partners for domestic abuse. He was also arrested for sexual assault. The man who opened fire at the movie theater in Lafayette, Louisiana in July 2015, murdering 2 women, injuring 8 others. He'd been reported for domestic violence 7 years earlier. In 2008, his family sought a protective order against him after he'd made threatening statements aimed at his own daughter, his wife, and other family members. And then before killing 6 people and injuring 7 others in a stabbing shooting spree in Isle Vista, California in 2014, the perpetrator had created a manifesto detailing his hatred of and violent thoughts toward women, and had previously harassed or attacked women, had attacked his own roommates, had attacked couples. Before he committed these random shootings, he stabbed and killed 2 of his roommates and a friend. Then the shooter who killed 20 children. See, this is when the gun debate ended. This is really when it ended. Sandy Hook. When America said you could kill 20 toddlers, 20 in elementary school 6-year-olds, 20 little teeny tiny kids. When America said that was okay, that was the end of the gun debate. Hope you know that. But that shooter who killed 20 kids and 6 adults in Newtown in 2012, he had first shot and killed his mother in the home that they shared. Everybody forgets that. And he had reportedly threatened his mother many times prior to the shooting. And subsequent investigations suggest he had a very disturbing thought pattern about children, let's say, and that he had abusive thoughts about children. And then the perpetrator of the now 3rd deadliest mass shooting in U.S. modern history, who murdered 32 at Virginia Tech in Blacksburg, Virginia. Now, we could have had a debate back then, but, you know, we had a Republican president then, too. He had been reported previously for stalking and harassing a couple of women also. Now, here's an interesting little factoid. Women living in the United States... This is a study that was published in 2016. About 4.5 million women have had an intimate partner threaten them with a gun. 1 million women have been shot or shot at by an intimate partner. And I wonder if you remember that poor woman who's finally out of jail here in Florida, whose intimate partner came to her house and she had the audacity to shoot at the ceiling to scare him off. She went to jail for firing a firearm with an infant in the house, with a baby in the house. So don't defend yourselves, women. I mean, you can't defend yourselves because men run the roost. Men make the laws. Men fail to report this or that. You know, it's unbelievable. So 760 Americans were killed by guns every single year in this country by their spouse, by their ex-spouse, or by somebody they were dating. Every year. There's nothing that the GOP could do. We can't do anything because it's it's a mental health issue. It's not an issue of guns. It's just this is not right.
You've talked about wanting to put extreme vetting on people trying to come into the United States, but I wonder if you would consider extreme vetting for people trying to buy a gun.
Trying to what?
Buy a gun.
A gun.
Well, you know, you're bringing up a situation that probably shouldn't be discussed too much right now. We could let a little time go by, but it's okay if you feel that that's an appropriate question, even though we're the heart of South Korea. I will certainly answer your question.
Your country is falling apart over here.
If you did what you're suggesting, there would have been no difference 3 days ago, and you might not have had that very brave person who happened to have a gun or a rifle in.
Okay. So we all need vigilante. What, there's no police officers that you could call in Sutherland Springs, Texas? I find that very hard to believe. Nobody knows how to dial 911 anymore. You need people, and the guy who did do this was amazingly frightened, and he is weeping because he knew he was killing or he thought he was killing somebody. Obviously, the shooter killed himself. He shot himself in the head. That's how he died. But you can't call 911 anymore. Everybody's got to have, a neighbor run barefoot in the street with a rifle and shoot. Honestly, what is wrong with these people? The only way that you're going to prevent anybody from hurting you is by having a neighbor or having a... What's wrong with calling the freaking police? We give them like freaking grenade launchers now and M4s and semi-automatic weapons, and practically they got grenade launchers. Oh, don't call them. Call your neighbor. Oh, this is so sad. This is such misrepresentation. All to protect the money. Go to RandiRhodes.com for the whole thing and a podcast. Buy a stinking podcast.